Morning. Today is Wednesday, August 26, 2020, and this is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing. The first case we're going to hear is actually the second on the agenda, which is RPC 14041-187, 3807 Wilson Boulevard. Speaking on behalf of the appellant is Mr. Blake Warren. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property.
Yes, so this is, and if you turn to I'm on page 110 of 168. It's our summary of facts that we submitted along with our appeal. This is the Amelia Apartments. It's located at 816 North Oakland Street. Consists of one taxable parcel, and for 2020, it was initially assessed at $45,543,600, and was subsequently reduced by the assessor of the county to $44,395,700. And what we're asking for from the board today is a value of $42,939,000. Now, this property was originally built in 2009. It's 108 total units. It's a mid-rise property consisting of one building and 8 stories tall. It's a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. Very much like some of the last couple of appeals that we've brought forth to the board this year. This is a pretty straightforward case, and if you turn to page 3, which is the county's I&E summary page, and you'll see the historical reported I&E information for the subject property. Initially, this property was filed filed last year as well. It's been the same issue the last couple of years. Has been due to the operating expenses and the county underestimating the total operating expenses for this property. And that was our initial case this year. So if you look at what's historically been reported here over the last 4 years, specifically the last 2 years, 20% in 16, 19% in 2017, 24% in 2018, and then most recently 26.35%. Initially, the original assessment for the multifamily portion of this apartment, the county was applying an operating expense ratio of 21%. And in their revised column, and you can see in F1 and F2 combined with both the retail and the apartments, they're applying 26.2% for total operating expenses, which is right in line with what was reported in 2019 most recently. However, similar to some of the previous cases we've had this year, where the county has appropriately adjusted, we think, for operating expenses, they've subsequently increased their gross potential income. And what we're seeing here now in their adjusted column is a gross potential income and an EGI that is higher than anything that's ever been reported at the subject property. So just for the apartment rent, and this is just historically dating back from 2017, apartment rent of $2.87 million down to $2.82 million in 2018, and then $2.952 million in 2019. The county in their initial assessment of the apartments estimated a total rent for the apartments of $2.883 and bumped that up above what was actually reported in 2019 to $3.025. And then when you get down to the EGI, you'll see that what was combined reported for both the apartments and the retail portion of the property was $3.286 million for the effective gross income, and the county is now at $3.377455. So again, while we think they made an appropriate adjustment for the operating expenses and where this property has been trending with their operations, and where we expect it to continue to trend in the future, the county is now bumping up their revenue estimates above what anything that this property has ever reported. So obviously, given the current situation and where we are now, I don't expect that to trend higher for the next year, and I don't think the owner would expect that either. If anything, it's trending down significantly. So again, we were fine. I think they were very close in their initial estimate for GPI. It's just their test column is now above, again, with anything that's been reported. So they fixed the operating expenses, but we think missed the mark on their revised test column for total revenue. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cheekas.
Good morning, board members. Good morning, Blake. We'll stay on the page 3 of the summary sheet showing the historic operating performance of the property, years 16 through 19. Specifically looking at what went on in the year 19, we saw apartment revenue increased by 4.5%. It was up 16, 17, and it was down slightly in 18. That may have been due to some concessions or some of the tightening of the vacancy, as the vacancy dropped off a bit from 17 to 18. But again, up in 2019 at 4.5%. Retail revenues up 3 years in a row. 2019 increase of 4.3%. Parking's up 5%, and total gross potential is up 4.2%. Again, up in 16, 17, down about 0.5%, 0.6% in 18, and up again 4.2% in 19. The building's fairly stable, stabilized true vacancy at 4%, looking at an average of years 17 through 19. When you include concessions, it's still stabilized at 4.1%, again, years 17 through 19. Effective gross income is up 4.8%. As Mr. Warren noted, the expenses went up quite a bit in 18 at almost 25%, and again in 19 at about 17%. We did make a change, as we can see in columns F1 and F2, to reflect that increase, since 17. We did note in some of the conversations with the owners that some of these expenses were what we would consider a one-time bump, if you will. You can see on page 28 of 168, there's emails between myself, Blake, and Sophie with Ditmar that talked about a $20,000 leasing commission. That was a one-time payment to renew the Mattress Warehouse lease. That is their one retail tenant. And then there was a $10,000 charge for I believe it's an internal processing, some sort of a processing system that they use. Let me get the exact words, I apologize. This was for a property management system expense. So these are really things that we don't expect to be annual operating expenses. Even still, you'd exclude those and you'd still be right around 800,000 or so for the 2019 year, which is still quite a bit of an increase over 2018. Even still, we went ahead and included that amount in our revised numbers. As you can see, we went to 26.2% of effective gross, as you again can see in columns F1 and F2. There's 3 numbers listed there, but of course you have to combine the residential or multifamily component with the retail component to get the number in the middle, which is their total operating expense. So again, well above what they reported in 16, 17, 18, and again, even still allowing for a bit of an increase in the number that was reported in 2019. They had a 3-year average of just over 700,000 or 23% of effective gross. Again, obviously that's trending upwards as we can see in 18 and 19, but again, given our revision, you can see that we allowed for that and then some. Net operating income was also up. Again, it was up in 16, 17, down a bit in 18 due to that 25% increase in expenses. But it was up again in 19 at 1.1%. When we look at the revisions that were made by the county and reflection of the information received for the 2019 INE, we can see that we projected fairly modest growth on the rental side. And to explain that a bit, Mr. Warren mentioned that these were numbers that had never been achieved. But with respect, the apartment revenue that was achieved in 2016 had never been achieved before, and yet increased 4.5%, 4.3%. 2017's apartment revenue had never been achieved before, and yet increased by 3.3%. And again, we saw the numbers achieved in 2019 had never been achieved before, but again, increased by almost 4.5%. When you look at page 100, you'll see the rent roll that was provided by the ownership. We take the time to go through that rent roll and differentiate the unit types and come up with the numbers that we do. And we can see that there is a pretty easily projection for 2.5% growth on the apartment revenue alone. As we mentioned earlier, the retail tenant signed a new lease. Obviously, there's expectation that that's going to grow. You'll see that we took the time to present a retail rent roll. I believe that's on page 4. So you can see the details in regards to that new lease that's signed. So we have a projection based on reality of the rent roll signed of a increase in rental revenue of approximately 9.6%. So again, that led to a fairly modest growth potential income projection of 2.8%. That led with a stabilized 5% vacancy, which again is a bit higher than what's been occurring at the property itself. A projection for effective growth of 1.36% to 1.4%, and a modest increase on total operating expenses, again, even considering the one-time bump of $30,000 or so in the 2019's reported expenses. So it's still projected to go up just shy of 1%, and again, a fairly modest projection for net operating income of 1.6%. Based on the information received in 2019, the rent rolls for the residential side, the retail rent roll, given its historical operating performance, we do believe that the columns F1 and F2 should be confirmed at a value of $44,395,700. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
For the applicant, is all the commercial leased?
Yes,
It's 100%, isn't it?
correct.
Okay. For the county, and this may be a question that I should already know the answer to. The statement by the applicant is that you properly adjusted expenses, but then you jacked up income. When you make your adjustment, do you do that after you get the actual income expense statement, or do you adjust prior to that? You adjust after you get it, right?
That's correct, Ms. Lawson.
Okay.
Yeah, we use the rent rolls to achieve the projections that we make, but again, seeing as they're based on the actual rent rolls being achieved,
Okay.
they're pretty on point.
Okay, any other questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, ma'am. Again, pursuant to Mr. Lawson's question, these changes, revisions that we made in F1 and F2 are reliant on the owner submitted information in regards to rent roll for the residential and retail component. That being said, we believe our fairly modest projections on income, as well as the increase in expenses over what's ever been achieved for the operating expenses, call for a confirmation of our revision of $44,395,700. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Warren, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, again, we feel that we initially filed this appeal based on an expense issue that's been we felt that the county is historically underreported at this subject location. In their test column, you can see that we felt that they appropriately accounted for that issue and that discrepancy based on what was most recently reported in 2018 and 2019. And again, this is in their test column. They've subsequently adjusted their revenue, which was very much in line with what was most recently reported, to go above and beyond anything that's ever been achieved here. Mr. Chikas made the statement previously that it's not unreasonable for property such as the subject that's a very stabilized property to achieve revenue above the previous year in a stabilized property. But I think this is one year, if any, that's. Could you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just going to
Yes.
just to finish. this is 1 year, if any, to consider the fact that with COVID and people losing jobs, people not able to work, that people in rent default, that this property is likely not to achieve revenue goals higher than what they've ever achieved previously.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, it's just among board members. What's everybody think? Mr. Lawson.
I guess am I muted? No, I'm off. I guess the only issue for us to decide is the county justified in a slight increase in expected revenue? I guess that's the issue that this case boils down to.
I actually would disagree with you. I mean, I see that, yes, they did increase that, but when you look at the actual NOI, I mean, even before they had the 2019 numbers, I mean, the original assessment was right in line. When they did the test, yes, in fact, they may have increased the income, but they also increased the expenses. And when you look at the NOI that they did on the revision, I think it's right in line with the 3-year historical. I think the appellant bringing up the issues of the COVID-19, that's going to affect, all the properties next year, but that's not relevant to January 1 of this year. So I'm fine with the county's revised numbers.
I
Anyone
am
else?
also, I'm also fine with it. I think it's exactly what you said, Madam Chairman, that it is logical, in my opinion, to go for that modest increase in revenue.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Mr.
Hey,
Yates?
good morning, Mary.
Okay. Wait, hold on one second. Mr. Yates?
No, I was going to say I agree with the county also. Given the dates of what we're looking at and not knowing the virus was coming there, that's all we could look at. And those are reasonable numbers. Anyway.
Okay, Mr. Penaranda?
Yes, good morning. I'm sorry you can't see me and I can't raise my hand right now, but yeah, I think, sometimes we get these appeals that they only want us to look at one specific number. But, we all know throughout the years that once an appeal is filed and the whole case is going to be reviewed, all the numbers are going to be looked at. And I think the county has done what they normally do. And I think they've done a good job also in this case that, that we have to look. And that's one of the things that I personally look at, all the rent rolls to see if they're in line with what the county has used. And I'm okay with reconstructed numbers. So with the current value, with the revised value.
I am as well.
I'd like to make a
Mr.
motion.
Yates? I'm sorry?
I'd like to make a motion to confirm the county's revised numbers.
Okay, so it actually would be a reduction to accept that.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay? Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second by Ms. Hogan. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. It's reduced to the county's revised assessment of $44,395,700. Thank you, Mr. Warren.
Thank you, Blake.
Do we have Ms. Borman in the queue?
Good morning, all.
Good morning. Okay, moving to the second case, which is actually number 5 on the agenda, RPC 36042-002, 2646 Richmond Highway. Ms. Eileen Borman is here to speak on behalf of the appellant. Ms. Borman, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about your property.
Thank you. So this property is a Holiday Inn. It was built in 1971. It is a budget-minded full-service hotel. Due to its age, it has smaller rooms than would be typical, et cetera. The property needs a little bit more maintenance than other properties. Mr. Chicks and I met a number of times about the property, and I want to say thank you to him for taking the time to look at it. The main issue that remains is if you look at the 2019 NOI, column E, it is about $600,000 less than what was used by the department in column D. Now, to their credit, they did come back and review their initial assessment and derived a revision, which appears in column F. So despite the fact that the income is fairly low, it's about 116,000 less than what was actually, the amount in the test is about $117,000 less than the amount in the department's revision. So where does that primarily come from? And that primarily comes from operating expenses. So the county did adjust, and the board adjusted last year operating expenses up by Mr. Peranda's motion to 71%. And the county this year did increase in their test to 73% in terms of operating expenses. The actual expenses over the last 2 years have been significantly more, well, not significantly, they've been about 74%. And the owners of this property, again, it's fairly old. It requires additional work that other properties don't necessarily require. And in going to the 74%, it is believed that it will continue at a 73.9% operating expense ratio moving into the future. Our appeal is based on the actual income that was earned at this hotel lodging facility property in 2019. And that is a little bit higher than what was earned in 2018. It is, obviously the future is not great for this property, but we do agree that January 1 is the date of value. And so we won't focus on any COVID related issues, but do believe that the 2 million that the number reported in column G is the number that should be used for expenses or for income. I will mention also that the expenses in terms of dollars did go up from 2018 to 2019. And that is primarily due to, there were some vacant positions at the property in 2018, which were filled in 2019. So the majority of the increase in expenses in terms of a dollar figure is a result of positions that were vacant being filled. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Again, for the county, Mr. Cheekas.
Thank you, ma'am. So again, looking at the property, relied primarily upon page 3, the income and expense summary. And what we're going to see is, as the board is familiar with how I look at the properties, we'll start with the top lines. And right off the bat, we see that occupancy ticked down 2.9%. And yet, even with the occupancy going down, average daily rate increased by $12.24. Revenue per available room increased as well by over $5, $5.11. And everything's up across the board. Metrics are up. So room revenue is up 5.9, food and beverage up 2. Miscellaneous is up just shy of 0.5%, 0.4%, and total revenue is up 4.9%, giving a 3-year average of approximately 11.835, 11,835,000. As Ms. Borman points out, the expenses did increase quite a bit, about 5% in 2019. I would differ with her a little bit in that primary driver. I did note there's approximately about $107,000 increase in payroll administration, which does make sense in regards to positions being filled. And while that would remain, that wouldn't necessarily be considered a one-time bump, because again, obviously, if that position is kept, that payroll will stay the same. But I noted the primary driver was actually a almost $250,000 increase in management fees and associated franchise fees. As the board has heard previous to this case, there is a correlation between the success of the property and the corresponding fees associated with that success. Most of these fees are based on a percentage of either gross revenue or room revenue in component with some other metric. So there is a corresponding increase associated with the operating expenses because of the success of the revenue side. Even still, there was an increase in the net operating income of approximately 4.8%, again, giving a 3-year average of about just shy of 2.6 million, 2,593,000. I believe Mr. Boardman also noted the expenses went up gradually, but increased so in 2018 at about 3%, and then just shy of 5% in 2019. If we were to look at what went on the last 3 years and smooth that out, we would see a 3-year average of about 8.5 million, or 72% of effective gross, 72% of total revenue. In light of that, we did make a revision, as you can see in column F. And what we did was essentially look at the averages that had been going on with the property. We noted that there was an increase in 16, an increase in 17, and then it dropped off in 18, and then came back into 19. Looking at the property itself, we saw that the owner had submitted some I&Es for listed capital improvements on their 2018 I&E of about 1.2 million, and another 1.45 million on the 2019 I&E for capital improvements. The property website actually also confirmed this in that they list renovations in 2018 and 2019. Not entirely sure what those renovations were. I couldn't find corresponding permits, but that would at least explain the drop-off in revenue in 2018. And essentially what I'm getting at is it appears that that was a bit of an anomaly, and the growth was fairly consistent 16, 17, and 19. Given the increase in expenses, we did want to note that obviously the real world expenses being incurred by the property owner. So we did revise those as well, quite a bit up from where we had projected the original operating expenses for January 1st. We look at the revenue side. We projected an increase, very modest, less than $9,000. It's not even 1/10 of 1%. But we did bring the operating expenses back into line with what's gone on over the last 3 years. Even if we were to discount 2016, looking at 17 through 19, we see a 3-year average of 8.5 million, or again, 72% of our revenue. We went to 73%, and again, a good bit higher than what was achieved in 17, 18, and again, slightly less than what went on in 19, but we do expect some sort of smoothing out over the 3 years that have been incurred. That led to a projected net operating income projection of approximately 4.8%. But again, very much in line with what's gone on historically at the property. When you look at the 3-year average of 2.593, we're actually lower than that average. Given the revision based on the operating history of 2019, which was actually up across the board, revenue up, operating expenses up, and importantly, net operating income up, we do believe our revision is in line with the historical operating performance. That being said, we believe the county should be confirmed, the revision should be confirmed at 30,180,500. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Questions from board members? No questions? Mr. Penaranda? Okay, apparently no questions. Mr. Chikas, do you have anything else you need to tell us about the property?
No, just again, looking at the operating performance, given the increases, we do believe that our revision is in line at 30,180,500. Thank you. Okay,
thank you, sir. Ms. Borman, do you have anything that you want to add in your last minute?
Very briefly, yes. Just in terms of the renovations and CapEx, that's the board may remember last year we were in talking about cracks in the building, and the board, we presented evidence to the board about cracks. That's what the majority of those renovations were, repairing of structural issues, cracks, and structural issues as related to the parking structure. In terms of the increase in expenses, it's right in line at the 74%, 73.9%. I will differ with Mr. Chikas in terms of the franchise and management fees are actually almost identical It's just that 181,000 in franchise fees was listed, separated out under marketing last year. So those expenses are almost identical. We are not asking for COVID to be taken into consideration, but we certainly don't think that the performance of this property is going to improve in 2020. And at the time that Mr. Chicas reviewed this case, we don't see any reason why he would have increased the or gone in excess of the actual NOI for preparing the review of the 2020 assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board members.
Let me start, Ms. Dooley. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to ignore you. I was just, I had my microphone off. But,
No problem.
I have, like last year I reviewed this case and I know that the expenses were adjusted. But, and I tried to look at pretty much all the numbers the same as last year. And I think for this year, I am okay with what the county has done. I think the 73% is appropriate looking at both years, not just, if we have numbers from previous years, we're not going to be ignoring them. I think we can't just make an adjustment based on 1 year for 2019. So I'm okay with the reconstructed number. I think it's in line what it should be.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Metz.
Just want to say, excuse me, very, very quickly, that I thought Mr. Chicas did a good job in explaining his operating expenses number. Excuse me. Allergy season started this morning. And because I had questions about that, but he bumped it up reminiscent to 2019 numbers, but not so much that it would be completely separate from 16 through 18. So got a happy middle ground, and I very much like the revision.
Okay, any other comments from board members? Okay, would somebody like to make a motion? All right, I'll move
Yes,
to confirm. I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
All right, then I'll move to confirm the county's revised number of 30,180,500.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Mr. Penaranda. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Mark, you're,
I was an aye.
thank you. It's unanimous. The tax assessment is reduced to the 30,180,500.
Thank you, board.
Thank you, Ms. Boyman. Thank you, board.
And Chris, I'm sorry I called you Cheeks.
It's all right. It's been worse.
It's not been the worst. Okay, do we have Jesse Al-Amin on?
Yes, he is.
Yes,
I'm here.
Okay, perfect. All right, the next case on the agenda is RPC 310250009, 2411 Shirlington Road. Mr. Al-Amin, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about your property.
Okay, it's a single family home that it currently is in renovation, and I requested that the value be decreased. And I just realized that I have a letter here where it was actually revised, and I'm in acceptance of that revision. This is a letter dated July 20th, 2020. When the original total was 509,800. Well, I'm getting it. $509,800,000, and then they revised it down to 438,800.
Okay, and you're willing to accept that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. I assume that Ms. Churchill, you're okay with that?
Yes, we're
Okay.
happy with that.
All right, thank you. Any comments from board members?
No.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion to accept it then?
This is Jose. I'm going to go ahead and move that we accept the revised assessment to 438,800.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second by Mr. Matskin. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The revised assessment is confirmed at 438,800. Thank you.
Thank you.
No.
Okay, moving to case 3 on the agenda. Do we have the appellant on, Rosa?
That would be Vanessa Ray. No, she didn't.
Oh, she did not join us?
She did not join us.
Okay, so on this property, this is the Nordstrom property. They were alerted. Their appellant or their agent has been moved back and forth between several people, but they've been sent emails and it's on the schedule. So we're going to hear this without an appellant. So calling that case, it's RPC 35005026 at 1400 South Hayes Street. Ms. Ross, if you want to start. Second, Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, Tom Calucci and I are joint owners of a piece of property. My understanding is he's no longer involved in this matter.
That is correct.
Given that understanding, I'm going to go ahead and participate.
Okay. Ms. Roskin, you can start with your 8 minutes.
Sure. Just to let you know, Tom Calucci is not a representative of this property. This is Catherine Corteau. He was never a representative of this property. That was an error on the list. I briefly managed to get a hold of Catherine Corteau after numerous attempts to contact her. And she sent me a one-page document, which I believe is attached. Let's see. Let me find it. I think it's page 33 of the case, which is her whole appeal. And we talked about this. Now, I've researched a bunch of news articles about Nordstrom, you know, stores closing, which ones are closing, and such. And I found a couple of news articles. And one of them, they said that some are going to, 16 stores are going to be closed. Only one is in the state of Virginia, and that's down in Richmond. So this store is not in danger of being closed at this time. She also sent, they have a lease that does not expire until the year 2080. And additionally, I wanted to add, I know COVID is not part of this discussion, but I wanted to add a couple of things that Nordstrom is reporting in the news. And one of the things they said was, but while COVID-19 has led department stores to file bankruptcy, Nordstrom officials say they are in a strong financial position. We're entering the second quarter in a position of strength, adding to our confidence that we have sufficient liquidity to successfully execute our strategy in 2020 and over the longer term. Now, another news article that states, there is not to say the company is packing it in when it comes to mall-based stores. They are crucial for brand building and supporting e-commerce, says Nordstrom. And the CEO notes that all of the company's department stores are in a so-called A malls, Class A malls, the centers with the highest end tenants. In general, we feel good about our locations. And once again, this particular store is not on the chopping block. When I researched the rents for this particular property, obviously Nordstrom owns a lot of their stores. So I went to CoStar trying to find something that would be comparable, but the best I could find was around 90,000 square feet. This particular store is 225,000 square feet, but the best I could find for rent was between, hold on a second. I think it was, it said $37 to $45 a square foot. That's for an 88,000 So I looked up a Nordstrom on CoStar that's in Maryland, and CoStar suggests that the rent for that should be $24 to $29 a square foot. For this property, we're only using $11.25 a square foot. It's pretty low. It's in a premium location. We're talking this is as good as it can get. We're in the close to DC Mall. When I visited that store, the mall, and I did just about a couple weeks ago, they ship in people to come to this place, this location. They were even doing that before COVID-19. They'd have busloads of people that would drop off right out front. So I did find another store that's within the general area, and it's about 170,000 square feet. And its rent is 40% higher. I don't want to name names, but its rent is 40% higher than what we are using. As for the cap rate, it's the same cap rate that's being used for Macy's at Fashion Center. And I believe it's a higher cap rate. I mean, I'm sorry, it's higher than the mall. The mall's cap rate, Fashion Center, is 7.25. I apologize, flipping through multiple screens. Yeah, at Fashion Center Mall, we're using 7.25, but for Nordstrom, we're using 8.5. We billed at our assessment at $22,328,000 is very reasonable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Roskin. Questions from board members? Mr. Matskin?
Ms. Roskin, where did that was a great presentation, made a great deal of sense to me. One easy question, this 23%, 21% total operating expenses. I was looking up in the guidelines, couldn't find it. Where's the 21% come from? How did you determine that?
I think it was something that was established a few years ago with Nordstrom, and we just kind of maintained that. They don't supply us with income and expense statements, so we make our best judgment, reviewing what we see in CoStar and historical information.
Yeah, it seems like a very generous, in their direction, percentage number. So you've given them a break on the proposed rent, absent any input, and also on the proposed expenses. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question, Ms. Roskin. And you know how I feel about when appellants don't provide I&Es. But the appellant did make a comment in the write-up that it shows about the sale of the Nordstroms out at Dulles that only sold for $5 million. Do we know how large that store was? Just to address the square footage issue? Because I know you talked about the Maryland.
I believe it's in one of her pages. I think it said it's 143,900 square feet, and
Okay.
the developer bought the store back.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to clarify that. Other questions? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying is that we did reach out and discuss that sale, and it was the people involved said it was a below market sale. It was that whole shopping center was having trouble.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Hoffman?
Didn't we have in Arlington an anchor sale a couple years back with Macy's in Boston? I'm just trying to think if there were any comparables in this county. Maybe that's
none that Irving.
The Boston was actually listed for sale this year. That's this year that it was listed for sale.
Okay.
It's being advertised as a possible development, and it may even be sold back to the owners of that mall as well.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Just looking for comps. That's all. I think it's a good assessment. You're probably right, Ken, that it's a little bit underassessed at this time.
Right, and is Mr. Millman on the call?
He is.
I see his
He is?
initials.
Okay.
Yes,
Hello,
I
this is
see
Rick
him.
Millman.
Okay, I just want to clarify, Ms. Ruskin, so they have not provided I&E statements for the previous 3 years, just the pro forma?
Correct.
So, Mr. Millman, I just wanted to clarify, doesn't the Virginia statute say that if they don't provide I&Es, they can't even argue against the assessment anyway?
No, they can bring any case. They can argue a case, but the courts basically have found that they're not going to accept the challenges or give much weight to their appeal. But yeah, you can file an appeal just for the signature on a form without supplying any information.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Then I just have comments when we get to that point. Any final questions from board members?
No.
No? Okay, Ms. Ruskin, do you have anything else you need to tell us?
Just a really brief thing. Like I said, I researched in CoStar, the Nordstrom in Maryland showed that average rent for that would range from $24 to $29 a square foot, and we're using $11.25 a square foot, and that this property is not on the chopping block for store closures of Nordstrom. I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among board members. I mean, I just will start by saying the burden of proof is on the appellant. They haven't provided information. I don't think the assessment is wrong. And the only pro forma statement that the appellant has given for 2020 puts it at less than half of what it's assessed at. I think that's absurd. I mean, I'm not even sure why we're hearing it.
I agree.
Mr. Lawson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First, I compliment Lori on great job of research. I just wanted to share that when we did the zoning down there for Pentagon Row, one of the things that came to our attention is that dozens of tour buses show up and let customers off at this mall. And I myself don't want to go on a tour to a shopping center, but apparently thousands of people do. And we couldn't figure out what to do with the buses. The second thing is, we tried to buy Costco. And what we learned is that that's the, I think, second highest revenue generating Costco in the entire country. So I've got my personal experience confirms what Lori has said, that this is just as good as it gets.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? No? All right.
Mary,
then
I'm sorry. I'm not sure
Mr.
if you
Panorama,
can hear
go
me,
ahead.
but I lost my audio. But I wanted to just, if you can hear me, I wanted to let you know that I'm okay with the current assessment, and I'm in favor of just keeping the way it is. I don't think the appellant did much to present the case in this particular appeal.
Okay, thank you. All right, with no other comments, then I'll go ahead and move to confirm the county.
I'll second.
Okay, motion second by Mr. Yates. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county's confirmed at $22,328,200. Thank you, Ms. Ruskin.
Thank you. Okay,
and the final case on the agenda is the fourth on the schedule, RPC 350050029, 850 Army Navy Drive. Mr. Calucci represents the appellant and is asked to withdraw. The county has no objections. Any comments from board members? No?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion to accept the withdrawal? Mr. Matzkin.
So moved, accept the withdrawal.
Okay, I'll second. All in favor of accepting withdrawal?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. It's 6-0 with Mr. Lawson abstaining. The county's confirmed. Okay, that finishes the agenda. Does anybody have any other business? from the board members?
No.
County have any business? Okay, we adjourn at 9:51. We'll re-adjourn next Tuesday, September 1st at 9 a.m.
I
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.